Crystal Graham, joined by AFP editor Chris Graham, breaking down a story that hasn't got a lot of comment from those involved right now. Chris, the Augusta County Sheriff Donald Smith is being sued by a former deputy related to a forced resignation. The news about this, the suit, all that information was released this week. Donald Smith so far has given no comment on the pending lawsuit against him, which seeks not only damages related to his termination, the former deputy Dennis Reynolds, but it also seeks punitive damages directly from Donald Smith himself, saying in part that law enforcement officers must be held to the highest standard. Chris, you broke down this suit. It was not an easy one. It was very lengthy, but I know that you kind of went through it with a fine-tooth comb. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about it.
All right, get yourself some popcorn here. Maybe make yourself a meal. There's a lot in this story, and so Crystal, feel free to break in when you need to. But yeah, this I recommend that people take the allegations in this with a grain of salt, just because this is a story that's been peddled to me for the last couple of years, and I'll go into that in a second too. But the suit is styled Reynolds v. Smith, Dennis Reynolds, former sheriff's deputy, versus Donald Smith, the current sheriff. It was filed in federal court in the Harrisonburg Division of the U.S. Court for the Western District of Virginia this week, as you mentioned there. Um, there. The reason I say take it with a grain of salt is I know some of the folks who are involved around the periphery of the story. Donald Smith has been a target of a certain number of folks for political reasons for the last 10 years, basically ever since he won his sheriff's job in 2015. There may be merit to the suit. I'm not saying that there isn't. The suit itself alleges, quote, a disturbing pattern of constitutional and statutory violations, including disability discrimination, retaliation, defamation, and sexual harassment. Um, we did reach out to Donald Smith for comment, it's not unexpected that, a person who's been filed, who's been, named in a 109-page lawsuit, would not offer comment, publicly, especially right after it was filed. Really, probably any time leading up to potential, not only the discovery process, but then, the eventual hearings, if there are such in court, just because you don't want to put anything on the record that could hurt your case down the line. So I'm not I'm not reading lack of transparency into the lack of a response. The attorney in this case is a guy from Charlottesville named Elliot Harding. Elliot is a UVA graduate, also a Washington Lee School of Law graduate. He has a political background. He worked on the staff of the former 5th District Congressman Tom Garrett for the one term Tom Garrett was in office. Harding also ran as independent against Democratic State Senator Creedy Deeds back in 2019. His name got some Google mention. Harding's name, that is, that campaign. He was caught on a doorbell camera late in that campaign, late in October of that year, caught taking Deeds campaign materials from the homes of several residents of Western Albemarle County, Crozet area. So I mean, I had to mention that. I mean, if you want to mention that there's a lawsuit, you got to mention a lawyer. You got to kind of bring that kind of stuff up.
Yeah, and I was going to say too, Chris, I had a paralegal and I were having dinner earlier this week, and one thing she mentioned to me was, of course, it's not going to be an Augusta County attorney that takes this case. So he is based in Charlottesville, which was her first guess as to someone who might take the case. I thought maybe, Chris, though, we could also talk about Dennis Reynolds and how his name kind of first came on our radar, because we've written about him before, not in relation to this lawsuit, but basically he was a canine officer with the Augusta County Sheriff's Office. And I guess the sheriff's office had allowed him to construct a carport at his personal residence just to help with his trained police dog. The dog's name was Rico. And when Reynolds resigned from the sheriff's office, now he says under duress. Basically, Smith then sent him an invoice for more than $3,000 for the cost of the carport. I remember the brouhaha that came up related to that. People were very angry that the sheriff's department was now demanding funds. The sheriff's department, on the flip side, was saying, "Hey, we spend the public's money. We have to, do so in a good manner, and so that's the reason that we're asking for these funds." It eventually got resolved. I think the Virginia police, like Canine Association, stepped up, paid for the carport, and then that was really the last that we had heard about Dennis Reynolds until now.
What's interesting too, Crystal, then is that I'm reading through I get the press release from the lawyer in this case, Elliot Harding, and I'm reading through the 109-page legal brief filed in federal court, and there's nothing in the suit that mentions the carport thing, like even in passing, like say this is something that happened. I made the connection just because I wrote the story about Dennis Reynolds 2 years ago, and I'm thinking, well, and I didn't immediately recognize the name, but I remember thinking, oh, I wonder if that's connected there in any way, and of course it is. Yeah, so the story with Dennis Reynolds then goes back a little further than 2023. 2021, Dennis Reynolds' brother Robert Reynolds was involved in a one-car traffic accident. How this all plays, this will be part of the story. Dennis Reynolds contacted, according to his own suit, the Augusta County Emergency Communications Center to ask the ECC to not call the state police about that one-car accident involving his brother. That led to an internal sheriff's investigation into whether or not the call constituted obstruction of justice. That in turn led to a state police investigation. Now, this is where that little tidbit from 2021 is the story of everything else. The Virginia State Police investigation did not ultimately lead to charges against Dennis Reynolds. But in the course of the investigation, Reynolds alleges in his suit that Smith, the sheriff, instructed him to, quote, delete evidence that might be subject to the investigation and potential search warrant, which, according to the suit, again quoting now, included numerous inappropriate and salacious text messages that defendant Smith had sent to plaintiff, suggesting an additional motive for defendant Smith to want these communications destroyed. This is where things get interesting, Crystal. How much do
Well, because it says that, Chris, reading your story, there were over 1,100 text messages between Smith and Reynolds, and over, I guess, 107 conversation. It says during the same period, and it said it was an unusual supervisor subordinate relationship. And I'm going to let you break down the allegations beyond that.
unusual is a word, yeah. So quoting the lawsuit, defendant sent numerous unprofessional and sexually suggestive messages to plaintiff. These included, according to the suit, comments about the size of plaintiff's genitalia, statements that he would come cuddle within quotes, offers for plaintiff to stay at defendant's house in Churchville. Defendant repeatedly told plaintiff he loved him and wanted him, quote, close. So, I mean, you can't get more salacious than that. On top of that, then there was a scary health issue for Reynolds. He had a tumor basically at the base of his spine that was causing immense pain. Um, and there was then even more issues than related to that in regards to their inappropriate relationship, as has been
Right.
suggested in the suit.
Right. And without a lot of specifics, I do remember this, as you said, there's a group kind of behind that has peddled a similar story to you before, because I remember, if I recall, that there was an incident where there was a gentleman that was in police custody in Harrisonburg or Rockingham County. And I remember that someone tried to say that there was a relationship between Smith and this individual as well, like an
Male
inappropriate
individual, yes,
relationship of
yes.
some kind. So anyway, we didn't write about that story then. We probably wouldn't have written about this again, except, as you said, when the lawsuit is basically dropped in your lap. And what we're reading here, of course, is all allegations. This is all directly from the lawsuit. This is all things that Dennis Reynolds and his lawyer claim. It'll ultimately be played out in court. But so you mentioned the fact that that Dennis Reynolds had a health issue, and that there were some interesting text messages back and forth, according to Reynolds, related to that. What else did you learn when reading that suit? Because I know it was 109 pages and it was a lot to digest in a short period of time.
Yeah, and I'm trying to like boil it down as much as possible. I did in the story, which is on AugustaFreePress.com, and here on this video and this podcast. I'm left to question what happened in their personal relationship that led to a change in attitude from the sheriff. Because from quoting from the lawsuit, quote, plaintiff requested additional time off in early May 2023 to address physical and mental health needs related to both the tumor and then the stress from having to deal with the health issues of the tumor. But he was denied due to alleged staffing needs, the suit says. Reynolds was later suspended from his job after refusing to sign disciplinary letters related to him taking mental health days. So after basically he was refused the additional time off, he just took sick days. And then an issue was raised with him taking sick days. Uh, so he was given disciplinary letters to sign, refused to do so. He was handed a decertification letter rehashing the allegations dating to that 2021 incident for which he'd been cleared, according to the suit. Um, so he was ultimately forced to resign in July of 2023 under duress, he says in the suit, quote, as he was faced with the choice of resigning or being formally terminated for alleged policy violations that were directly related to his use of sick leave for mental health purposes. This is where things get confusing because we'll find out that the suit alleges that Sheriff Smith, quote, submitted a notification of eligibility for decertification to the Virginia Department of Criminal Justice Services seeking to have plaintiff decertified as a law enforcement officer. So not only then was Reynolds not going to be eligible to work for the sheriff's office anymore, he couldn't get a job anywhere in Virginia, at least, because he was going to be decertified as a law enforcement officer.
Well,
Um,
and the mental health aspect again, is that something that should really be made public? I mean, regardless, you think about, HIPAA laws and how they apply to your medical records and things of that nature. And police officers, oftentimes, if they show any sign that they have any kind of mental health issues, that can stick with them for a long period of time. It's the same kind of thing that happens in the nursing profession and some other military and things like that, where they just prefer not to talk about it. And of course, bringing that up and putting that as part of the reason to decertify him would certainly leave that with him for a period of time, even though, just like a health issue like he had encountered previously, that can be treated. And so it's always interesting to me as a mental health advocate, just how those things kind of play into employers and how they deal with health issues, because a mental health issue is a health issue. If you need to take time off for your mental health, I don't see any reason why you shouldn't be able to use sick days for that. So I think that there
especially
will
when you're a
also,
law,
yeah,
especially
go
when you're
ahead.
a law enforcement officer, that's a stressful job. I mean, and so this is where I say Crystal Graham is a professional mental health person because I did not write this in the story. That was though in the lawsuit a big section about how one of the reasons Reynolds was reticent to sign any paperwork was he felt like his HIPAA rights were being violated. So
But those things follow you too. It's the same reason that a lot of times, nurses and things of that nature, if they're going to get mental health treatment and it's going to be reported back for some reason, they just won't get the treatment, because they're afraid that that will follow them in their career and that it'll lead to some issue there. That happens a lot, like I said, in the military as well. Even if they're going for treatment, once they feel like they're flagged that they have mental health issues, it prevents them from getting future promotions and things of that nature. So I certainly can understand his hesitation to want to sign anything related to mental health. I feel like mental health and sickness, they're one and the same. Like we all have days where, I even some days will tell you, Chris, I can't focus, like there's other things on my mind right now. I need to take a mental health day. And a lot of employers are starting to build those in, as far as having time off and that kind of thing for mental health days. Some people get one a month or one a quarter or something like that. I have a friend who takes them regularly, and sometimes it's just to, participate in a demonstration if she wants to do that because she feels like, hey, this is good for me and good for my mental health. So that is certainly another thing that comes into play here. And I think also too that even though ultimately Reynolds, came out victorious in this fact that, he wasn't, his certification wasn't taken away. He feels like the sheriff has also prevented him from getting other potential jobs, which I'm sure again is part of the reason that the suit is so real, because this he's certainly not at retirement age, right, Mr. Reynolds? And
Well,
so,
let me, I'll correct you. You said the word victorious. He's not, he was
okay,
victorious in one
correct.
sense. The Virginia Department of Criminal Justice Services Board, 6 months later, so early 2024, sided with Reynolds unanimously to say that, basically they were not going to approve a notification for eligibility for decertification. But Smith has, according to the suit, since worked to try to prevent Reynolds from getting other jobs in law enforcement. According to the suit, it seems like there was an outstanding offer from the Nelson County Sheriff's Office just over the mountain from us that was disrupted. The job offer was rescinded because Smith, according to the suit, sent one of these letters to the sheriff there to say that he shouldn't be employed by the sheriff's office over there. And so the suit says, quote, the decertification attempt has severely damaged plaintiff's professional reputation in the law enforcement community, making it difficult for him to secure comparable employment. So, Crystal, you mentioned earlier when we were starting talking about this, just about the damages that are being requested in the suit. $5 million in compensatory damages. Now, that would be basically county taxpayers paying whatever amount of money up to 5 million, maybe more. Who knows? Or jury might decide, more or less. $350,000 also against Smith in what would be called punitive damages based, quote, on his willful, wanton, and malicious violation of plaintiff's clearly established rights. Those rights including the right to sick days for mental health, as you've gone into great detail there.
Mhm.
And so,
Well, and I think the other part too is the reputational harm, right? And that was something that was pointed out in the news release. If he's not able to get another job, at least in this immediate area, is he going to be forced to relocate or go somewhere else if he wants to stay in the profession? So I think in a lot of ways, a lawsuit of this nature is one to compensate him for the fact that he hasn't worked in a couple of years now, that he's not able to get a job because he feels like Sheriff Smith is, for whatever reason, blocking him from getting additional employment through a reference or something of that nature. And then third, if he has to relocate to get a job in another state or something of that nature, there's cost involved with that as well. So it definitely feels like, in this case that, the Mr. Reynolds felt that he was very vulnerable, and he feels like now that, future avenues of employment have been shut down for him.
no doubt. So we'll be, again, this is one side of the story, and it's a very detailed side of the story. And just to reinforce, the sheriff declining to comment does not, he's not conceding anything here. It's just what you do when you're faced with a public lawsuit of this nature. I don't know that he contacted a lawyer, but a good lawyer would tell you don't make a comment on this kind of thing. Like, wait till you get to court if it gets that far. So there is another side of the story. We don't know it yet. We may not know it. We won't know it until if and when this ever actually gets to trial. Who knows how things are going to be resolved here. It's not going to be anytime soon, certainly. But all that said, yeah, these allegations, again, I've been hearing the whispers about them, Crystal, for a couple of years. I heard about it contemporaneously. I mean, this was playing out as that carport story that we wrote about in July of 2023. That was sort of the tip of the iceberg to the rest of this story. There's a lot here. I don't know what we're gonna ultimately find out, but this is definitely going to be something we'll be paying attention to the next few months, maybe the next couple of years.
Yeah, this could play out for a considerable amount of time, and like you said, there's always the possibility that, the county's insurer, that the county will choose, that they don't want this in the courts, and so that they'll make some kind of an offer just to settle this. But time will tell with that. As you said, these are all simply allegations. Continue to follow the story on AugustaFreePress.com. You can always click on the tags at the bottom of the story. There's one for the Augusta County Sheriff's Office or Augusta County, if you want to specifically hone in on those two subjects. For Augusta Free Press, I'll wrap up this segment about the Sheriff's Office and Dennis Reynolds, and time will tell what happens with this lawsuit.